It's the Happy Families Podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Yesterday on the Happy Families Podcast, I joined Dr. Ross Greene. He is the author of The Explosive Child and an associate clinical professor at Harvard Medical School. We were having a great conversation about his CPS model, the collaborative and proactive solutions model that he outlines in his book, The Explosive Child. That conversation continues today. Ross, thank you so much for being here again.
I appreciate you inviting me.
Ross, when I was working through The Explosive Child some time ago now, I came across a mathematical formula. And normally this is the kind of thing that would turn anybody off any kind of a parenting book. Because hang on, I'm reading parenting, I'm not reading maths. This is not how I want to spend my Friday night. But it struck me as being such a profoundly important formula. I'd love to unpack it with you for a couple of minutes just now. You describe the formula as such: inflexibility plus inflexibility equals meltdown. Can you talk about this in the context of an explosive child, or in fact in the context of just, I think, any relationship really?
The kid is already inflexible by nature. That's inflexibility number one. If your stance toward the kid is equally inflexible, perhaps in an effort to show the kid who's boss, perhaps in an effort to teach the kid a lesson they'll never forget, all these things that we think we're supposed to be doing as parents. So that's inflexibility number two. If that's your equation, then it's not going to be pretty. Now, the addendum to that is that doesn't mean you're a pushover. A lot of people take inflexibility plus inflexibility equals meltdown to mean, okay, so if my kid's inflexible already, then I have to be perfectly flexible. Where do I have influence at that point? No one said that we are replacing your inflexibility with 100% flexibility. It's just that the math equation still holds. If you pair two inflexible people with each other, it's not going to be pretty. That's where the problem-solving process comes in. This is just not about being inflexible with somebody who's already inflexible. This is about proactively and collaboratively solving the problems that you were being inflexible about in the first place, so that there's really no inflexibility left in the equation.
Let's talk about timing here, because so often parents will say, well, my child's being inflexible. I know that I'm supposed to be flexible here, which means that we need to have a collaborative and proactive conversation. But if we reflect on the high emotions equals low intelligence idea, how do you communicate with parents around the idea that we obviously need to find a solution really quickly because there's a problem right here, right now, but this isn't necessarily the time to sit down and try to work out a collaborative and proactive solution because we're going to end up with a meltdown. And I guess the other challenge is so many parents will say, but I have the right to be inflexible because I'm 30 years older than this child or 40 years older than this child, and I know what I'm talking about. I know that I'm right. They need to listen to me.
I have the right because I'm 30 years older to make a great big mess out of something that didn't have to be a great big mess in the first place.
And yet so many parents will hold fast to that, right? In the moment, we're so right.
The goal of the CPS model is to get people out of the moment.
Yeah.
Whatever expectation this kid is having difficulty meeting right now, I promise you it's not the first time. In fact, it's probably the 50th time. Why we are still dealing with it in the heat of the moment when it is entirely predictable is probably because we haven't yet made a list of all of the expectations the kid is having difficulty meeting and prioritize that list so we know the unsolved problems we're trying to solve right now, and we know the ones that we're trying to put on hold right now. The first edition of The Explosive Child was mostly about solving problems in the heat of the moment. Every edition since then has been about solving problems proactively, which simply means making your list of every single expectation your child is having difficulty meeting reliably. Whether they can meet it sometimes and not others, it's still an unsolved problem. Deciding which 2 or 3 you're going to start working on first and starting to solve those problems proactively, not just collaboratively. In the CPS model, as well as in other places, we would call that get out in front of it. If you don't get out in front of it, you're going to be behind the 8 ball every single time, and saying, well, what am I supposed to do? I've got time pressure here. I'm in the heat of the moment. That is not a given. You make your list, you're not going to be in the heat of the moment anymore. As we frequently say to the parents we work with, I'm going to get you out of the heat of the moment, but you need your list first.
At which point you then sit down with your child and you ask them, what's up? You seem to be having difficulty. To go back to the language, you seem to be having difficulty here. What's up? And then you work through that collaborative conversation where you explore their world, make sure that they understand what the expectations and the limits are, and then work on solutions together that are satisfactory for both parties to the extent that you can.
You got it.
Yeah, beautiful. Ross, one more big question that I think every parent will want to hear an answer to. You have an entire chapter devoted to the truth about consequences. This is a favorite topic of mine. I love talking about it, but I love the way that you articulate the ideas in this chapter. Would you just help parents to get a sense of what the truth really is about consequences and how they impact on a child's ability to either be flexible and adaptable and to tolerate frustration well and all the things that we've talked about, the emotion regulation and so on? What's the truth about consequences?
The truth about consequences is that they're overrated and we rely on them much too heavily. There's other aspects of parenting that are far more important than consequences. But the bottom line is consequences are behavior modification strategies. What you're consequencing are behaviors you don't like. And you're rewarding the behaviors you do like, and you're punishing the behaviors you don't like. Just one problem with that. There's a problem that's causing that behavior. There's an expectation your child is having difficulty meeting that's causing that behavior. Concerning behaviors don't occur out of the blue. They occur when a kid is having difficulty meeting a particular expectation. And the truth about consequences is that they do not solve any problems. And I'm quite convinced that they don't teach the skills that these kids are found to be lacking. And so that's why I'm saying that they're overrated. Yes, rewarding and punishing, behavior modification, what is known as parent management training, is an evidence-based approach. It's evidence-based for modifying behavior. That's what consequences are good at. And I was trained in consequences early in my career. That's how I was trained. But they don't solve the problems that are causing that behavior. So evidence-based though they might be, here's what I say. We can no longer be satisfied with merely improving a kid's behavior if the problems that are causing that behavior remain unsolved. It's not enough. And the best news is this. If we solve the problem that's causing the behavior collaboratively and proactively, not only is the problem solved, the behaviors that were being caused by that problem subside. We've all heard the cliche, behavior is communication. All concerning behavior communicates is that there's an expectation the kid is having difficulty meeting. Once that problem is solved, the need for concerning behavior is gone, and the need for consequencing the behavior is gone.
I love the way you articulate that. I've come under fire from some people who have very strong opinions about how we should be dealing with children and the consequences that they need to face for saying quite explicitly, I have it as a personal goal, and it's something that I encourage the parents that I work with to have as a goal, to never get my children in trouble. My goal is to not get them in trouble. I don't want to be punishing them. I don't want to be bribing them. I don't want to be sticking them in their room. I don't want to be threatening them. My goal is to never get them in trouble. And some people will misinterpret that as me becoming permissive, laissez-faire, letting the children have no rules, do whatever they want. But to the contrary, consistent with what you've described, when I see that we've got a challenge or a problem or a difficulty in our home, that becomes now an opportunity for connection. It becomes an opportunity for communication. It becomes an opportunity for flexibility and adaptability and development of frustration, tolerance, and emotion regulation, and ultimately problem solving. And if we solve those problems effectively, we never need to get anyone in trouble in our home ever. And it feels amazing to not be getting the kids in trouble. I mean, it's the ultimate, for me, it's the ultimate goal. Don't get the kids in trouble. Just work out solutions when problems arise.
This paradigm that if you're not consequencing, you must be being passive and permissive is absolute total BS. You have lots of options besides consequencing. They don't make you passive. They don't make you permissive. In my opinion, punishing a kid, at least on the surface of it, is a heck of a lot easier than solving a problem with the kid. It's harder over the long haul because you're solving nothing by consequencing the kid. But it's not hard to say to a kid, you just lost TV for a week. Look how easy that was, right? Sitting down with a kid to solve a problem, much more difficult. But only one of those two things is actually going to solve the problem.
Ross, your book is The Explosive Child, revised and updated, a new approach for understanding and parenting easily frustrated, chronically inflexible children. People can get that online wherever they want. You provide loads of resources for parents who have rigid and inflexible children, explosive children, children who don't regulate particularly well. And I think that your resources are absolutely worth shouting from the rooftops. If people want to learn more about what you do and how your work can help their family, where should they be visiting? Where would you send them?
livesinthebalance.org. LIVES in the balance.org. Lives in the Balance is the nonprofit that I founded in 2009, and the first goal of me founding Lives in the Balance was to provide all kinds of free resources to people who wanted to learn more about this model without them necessarily having to buy a book. So the website is better than it's ever been, more resources than there have ever been. We're constantly adding to it. It's there waiting for people, and livesinthebalance.org works just as well on the internet in Australia as it does here in the United States.
livesinthebalance.org. We will link to that in the show notes. Also, a quick plug. It's very, very early days, but we were chatting before I pressed the record button. You're heading to Australia. I'm sure people will be excited to hear that. Limited information at the moment, but if people follow you on Facebook or check your website, I'm sure that did you say it was September?
September. I'll be in Australia for 3 weeks and like 8 or 10 different cities.
Wonderful. Well, I'm looking forward to catching up with you in person when you show up here on our shores. Thanks so much for joining me on the podcast, Ross.
Thanks for having me on.
The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rule. I'm from Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. And for more information about what we've talked about today, check the show notes or livesinthebalance.org. And as always, a whole lot of great info to help make your family happier is also available at happyfamilies.com.au.